Testing. Mic testing this time. Is the sound working? So I left off on the other live because the sound wasn't working, and I was looking at myself blab at the camera for quite a long time without realizing that the sound wasn't working. So y'all who are just coming in, sound okay? Yes? Okay, good. Perfect. So welcome again. Let's try this one more time to tea practice on Sunday. Look at that. Such a nice welcome to the return of our weekend tea practices. If you guys have any sound problems, let me know. We had sound problems for the last couple attempts that we've done, but we're back. We're good. So, yeah, we'll talk about Kyusus. I thought it was a really good time to hit up the Kyusus because, you know, a lot of us who are teapot collectors, you guys might know, we don't always get the chance to give every single teapot our love. So I wanted to pick a tea practice today that could get a whole bunch of my teapots nice and active again. And I picked Kyusus, and I'm a really, really big fan of the Kyusu. Now, Kyusu, not to be confused with Kyushu, which is a place in Japan. Common misspelling, no problem. It's a side-handled teapot. You can use the word Kyusu to mean any teapot in Japanese, but usually when two people are talking and they're tea people, you're like, hey man, nice Kyusu. You're talking about this guy. You're not necessarily talking about a guy one. You'll never ever see someone saying like, hey, nice Kyusu. It's a guy one. So even if it's technically teapot, we're using the word Kyusu to mean Japanese teapot. Usually. In some cases, even if the pot is not Japanese, it can be side-handled as well. And so that's a secret that a lot of you pointed out from my story photos, is that this guy has a side handle, but it's not a Japanese pot, it's actually a Korean pot. So, you know, just in general, I would say Kyusu is any side handle pot. You can say specifically Japanese Kyusu. The most common of them are going to come from Japan. So yeah, I hope you guys have your own teapots ready if you're going to do any side-by-sides. Does anyone have any Kyusus they'd like to share with me? Send them over. Slide into the DMs. I like teapots. It's great. I'm going to be using 5 teapots today. They're all Kyusu. 4 of them are Japanese. 1 of them is Korean. Let me say my hellos. Tea Sleuth, thanks again. Eric, for helping us with the sound issue. Organic Tea Leaf, thanks for coming and letting me know the sound's okay. DS Yon, Lilac Sabina, Steve T, nice to see you guys. Geist, Borrowed Pages, Tyler from Hakuna Matata, nice to see you. Yeah, teapots are great. Cool. So, decided today that we only have time to pick one tea, and I'm going to pick Japanese tea. And the reason why I'm doing Japanese tea is because when people pick a Kyusu and they hear, oh, it's a Japanese teapot, usually the assumption is that it's going to be good for Japanese tea. I think it's a very fair assumption, you know, like if you buy a Chinese wok, it's going to be good for Chinese food. Or if you buy a, I don't know, Italian coffee maker, it's going to be good for Italian coffee. But the secret is, just because it's a Japanese Kyusu doesn't mean it's good for Japanese tea. I've tested these before. Maybe they might turn out differently than I expect. But I'm going to show that just because a pot might be from Japan doesn't mean it's necessarily good for Japanese green tea. And we're going to test all of these guys out with a pretty standard Japanese Sencha. It's going to be a Sencha that I like and have known pretty well. It's a Sayamidori Sencha. And when we do these experiments, y'all, I would suggest you always use a tea that you're pretty familiar with. Number 1, you have to have a lot of it so that you don't run out in between the experiments. But number 2, pick a tea that you know already. So if you just got your order from, you know, Japan, you're like, oh my god, let me test that new Sencha with all my 5 pots. You don't know the tea yet, so pick a tea that you know. And this guy I just brewed to death while practicing for Tea Masters Cup last year. Just brewed it and brewed it and brewed it and brewed it. I know it inside out. And so when something's wrong during the experiment or something's different, let's say like a new fruity note comes out or a new flowery note comes out, you'll know that it's probably the pot that's imparting some kind of difference. You're just trying to lower the amount of variables that you're kind of competing with. And before we start doing that, we are going to preheat these babies. Now, spoiler alert is hiding inside my 1 teapot. This has wheat oolong in it, because this Japanese teapot is actually good for Wu Yinglong. So, spoiler alert. Alright. Let's preheat our teaware. So this first step, we're just trying to get everyone at a consistent temperature. Right now, if you have a teapot in front of you or any kind of ceramic, it's going to be cold. So you want to preheat the teaware, make sure they're all up and primed to go. You all practice tea people know this already, but I like to remind myself because I always forget. I get lazy. And then we'll talk about each Kyusu later on. And then if you have any questions about how to pick a Kyusu, Kyusu maintenance, you know, you can ask the Kyusu master if one existed. But you can also ask me, second choice. I just like them. And maybe I can answer some questions based on what I've experienced with them so far. Tyler, I saw that you're escaping the Super Bowl. I'm not escaping. I'm more so deciding that I don't know how to watch it. I think for most of my life, I've like, oh yeah, Super Bowl Sunday, because everyone does it, so I'm gonna do it too. Even if I don't follow football. And I really do enjoy watching the Super Bowl here in America. For y'all who are not in America, today's the most important national holiday of the year, Super Bowl. Chiefs versus 49ers, at least I know which teams are playing this year. And I personally don't follow football, but I like to be in that environment where everyone's really excited about something, everyone's really passionate about what's going on. I like that environment. I don't necessarily like football though. So I decided that this year I don't have to force myself to be someone who indulges in that. You know, be true to yourself. And I still feel uncomfortable about it. I'm like, maybe I should be watching football just like the rest of the country, but oh well, I don't have to. I don't have to. It's okay. We can just do our Instagram Live, which I promised myself I'd do this weekend, so there you go. Alright, questions here. Tea sleuth, is a Korean one glazed inside? It is unglazed inside, but from the firing, there's a bit of like action going on. So it's not glazed. The outside glaze is from wood firing. So there's like an ash glaze on the outside. I'm not sure what kind of clay it is, unfortunately. I know the maker is Woo Si-hyung, but I don't know what the clay composition is. And interestingly, even if something is from a particular region, like Tokoname clay, very famous in Japan, these three guys, 1, 2, and 3, are all Tokoname clay pots. Not all pots from that area are going to be 100% Tokoname clay. Sometimes they'll source from other areas to blend, because each potter has their own specific blend that they work with. So not all teapots from that area are going to be 100% that clay. So I don't know if this is even 100% Korean clay. That's just something I realized recently, is that potters are actually quite open to mixing clays. I find that it's us in the West who are like, oh my god, if it's Ishin clay, I want it to be 100% from that one source only. Otherwise it's not legit, which I totally get, because I feel that way. But then, I mean, the potters know better. If they gotta use like different sources of clay, then so be it, you know? Okay, so I'm gonna, based on what I know the volumes of these pots are, I'm gonna adjust the amount of tea. So I'm gonna use 100 ml as my base, and based on the volume, so this guy is 280 ml, I'm going to put 2.8 grams of tea, versus this guy, which is 140, I'm going to put 1.4 grams of tea. So I'm just trying to account for the volume difference, otherwise you'll get a different result if you put the same amount of tea in a big teapot as you do in a small teapot. Does that make sense? Math stuff. Then again, this is a Sai Midori Sencha. Pretty standard from last year. It's a good Sencha, nice and balanced. It's got like a fruity, kind of fresh quality to it. Not really fruity. I mean, floral, like fruity in the way of white peaches. That kind of like fruity floral thing going on. Yeah. And then 1.4 into this guy. Now, will our results be hugely skewed if we didn't adjust for the volume in each pot. I would say it helps to make it consistent, but the material difference of each pot is so pronounced that if you're off by just a little bit, if you just eyeball and make sure one doesn't have like 50 grams and the other one has only like 2 grams, the material is so like distinct, you won't be able to taste the difference, I think. So even if you don't have a scale, you can do these kinds of experiments at home. Just try to eyeball them, if that makes sense. Let's see what questions I missed. Tyler from Hakuna Matala. Kyusu maintenance, have a really new one. Should I be doing anything to it? What kind of Kyusu is it? So if the Kyusu doesn't have anything inside of it, if it's like, you know, if it's completely glazed, if it's like a, yeah, I think my number one thing that I'm referring to when I think about Kyusu maintenance is making sure the filter stays unclogged. So I'm going to show you with this particular Kyusu that I'm working on right here. But I'm going to use all of it for this one. Yeah, okay. This guy over here, I'm not sure if it's visible, but this guy has a metal filter on the inside. And this guy clogs quite a bit if you don't rinse out the leaves immediately after use, because the leaves are nice and soft after you use them. But if you let them harden even just a little bit and stick to the sides of the metal filter, they can kind of get stuck there and not want to leave like forever. So it's really important to make sure that the filter is unclogged before you store these. But even if you have a ball style filter like this one here, you can just barely see the clay filter on the inside. I gotta find a better angle for this. There we go. Can you see that? Can you see that? Yeah. That bowl filter is not metal. You can still get bits and pieces stuck there that you need to make sure that you kind of flush out. I usually just, you know, put water through the spout on the other end to make sure it gets out. Besides that, if you have a Kyusu that is unglazed, just make sure that you preheat it just like any other pot so it doesn't crack, especially if we're in Las Vegas. All folks who are in Las Vegas, make sure that the Kyusu doesn't get shocked by temperature. Besides that, you all know the basics. I put too much into that one. Almost there. Still way too much. There we go, perfect. All right. This last one here, this is the Korean one. And yeah, not all of these pots I use for Japanese tea. I only use this one for green tea, that's standard, and this one for hojicha. So the other ones I don't even use for green teas specifically. But maybe, you know, I might change my mind. I do like to test my pots again and again and again from time to time to see if there's any difference, because maybe I was just having a bad day that day and I decided that this tea tasted horrible with Sencha, but actually it's okay. And even within the same category of tea, you know, stuff can taste different. So it's pretty good to try to test at least a couple of times. Okay, give this guy a little boil. There's nothing like having a whole set of teapots with tea in them ready to go. Nice and ratioed out. Experimental variables all controlled. So relaxing. It really is relaxing. Let's see. Eric, so little I used to do 3 grams per 100 ml. Yeah, me too, but I want to eyeball it. I mean, I want to like be able to know what volumes are without having to multiply stuff too much. Nicole from Tea For Me Please. Mark from Happy Cup Pottery. Nice to see you guys. Tyler, it's an unglazed Tokoname ball filter. Ball filters are the bomb. They do really well at preventing those clogged things from going on. So, yeah. I would just say, have you figured out what tea is good in it? Because I think a lot of the times when I first started collecting teapots, I would just go for it, not realizing that there might be a tea that the teapot really shines with. Now, a lot of really good teapots are good with many different teas. You're not going to notice like something horrible with it. Like this one here, like the Korean one is actually good with a lot of different teas, but it's just really amazing with white tea. And if I hadn't taken the time to like test every single bit, every single type with it, I might not find that one that's really, really, really good at. This one here is another Japanese clay pot. This is what's called a carbonized, meaning they rub carbon, or they apply carbon to the surface, I think by using rice husks during firing to get this dark color. Plus, like, the oxygen level is lower. Pottery stuff. It makes the pot dark. So the clay initially starts this color, or maybe more yellowish, more orangish, but like red spectrum. And then it turns really, really dark. And not only does that change the appearance of the pot, it also changes the taste of the pot itself. And that's why we have so much variation in how these taste, is that even if a pot might be a different color, it's not just for looks. It's also going to change the way it performs in the pot with tea. And this guy, I took the longest time trying to figure out what tea would be good in it, because it's just so temperamental. I had no idea. I went through, I mean, of course I tested Japanese tea. It was horrible. We'll see today how it goes. I tried aged oolong. I tried Taiwanese oolong. I tried white tea. I tried pu'er. I tried it all. Our local pu'er head Ken was like, oh, you know, try pu'er in it. It's probably a pu'er pot. It's like, it's not. It's actually a wheat oolong pot. It doesn't perform well with any other kind of oolong but Chinese wheat, which just drives me up the wall. It's so interesting how specific tea can get with its preferences. It's nuts. Okay. Let's label these guys. Start with this guy, because I was talking so much smack about it. So, from the right to the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I mess this up, you let me know, because I might. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright? And then we're going to pour the same way into each of these. I'm going to use near boiling water, as half the world of green tea enthusiasts screams. YOLO. I'm using about 205 degree water here. I don't really mind that I'm going to burn the tea leaves. Because these leaves are pretty high quality. I know they can take boiling water. I don't do this for every sencha, but I know this particular sencha does okay with boiling. It's not bad. Okay, I'm going to start with just these two, because I want to be able to manage the temperature differential pretty well. Okay, I didn't fill this up all the way. Ruined! Ruined! Okay, there we go. So let's start with 1 and 2 first. So number 1 is a tokoname, and number 2 is also tokoname. So what's interesting is that even if people say, I want a tokoname, you don't really know what you're getting until you see the pot. So Tyler, you're saying you have a tokoname. In my head, I have no idea what that pot looks like. I'm assuming that it looks something like this, because the red tokoname pots from Japan are the most classic kind of model, but they could look like anything. What kind of color do you have on your tokoname? Because now, after testing my pots and so many of our friends' pots, and, you know, just seeing how they perform, I've been able to kind of like estimate or just get a good guess at how a pot might perform based on the color. It's not set in stone, but so far I've gotten a pretty good ability to estimate these kinds of things just from trial and error. And typically the best performing ones for Japanese greens here are the lighter colored ones. Okay, let's wait for the 2-minute mark. And let's go. Now what I love about the Kyusu is that the fact that it's tight-handled allows you to pour at an angle, which helps you make it softer a little bit. So I'm not pouring all the way direct, I'm kind of tilting it to the side so it doesn't pour too high. And we saw from one of our old lives last year before I went to Taiwan that the way that you pour in and out of your teapot will change the way that the tea tastes also. Difference in color! Difference in color! Different colors! That's some BS. Look at that difference in color. Isn't that insane? Okay, so this one here is like a really bright green color. This one here is a light, kind of pale thing going on. These look like different teas. So, yeah. Differences in color! Differences in color! So, the lighter colored one is from my Tokoname red pot. This one, number 2. And then this one is making the more intensely colored tea pop out. So look at that color difference again. There's a clarity difference too. This one's a little bit more cloudy looking. This one's a little bit more light. Okay, let's see. So let's test number 1 first. Tyler, looks like your smaller red pot, around 200 ml or so. Might be a classic Tokoname. You know what? It's like at first I'm like, wow, I always talk so much smack about this pot for not doing well with green tea. It is the best green tea steep I've had from this pot in terms of Japanese sencha, but the problem is that it has a textural problem. It's just rough and tangy, just not what I want from this particular tea. It's not horrible though, which is interesting, because I usually get a really horrible response from this pot. So I don't know. Let's see. Finish this off. I poured too much for myself. Okay, pot number 2. And then Eric, but you did have oolong on the other. I did rinse it out. So, don't worry. And yes, this pot is somewhat seasoned for oolong. I'm not the biggest believer in seasoning. I think that material is a bigger deal than the seasoning over time. Because when tea dries up, it kind of just dries up. You know? Don't take my word for it. I don't follow seasoning. I don't test seasoning very much. Because I do just so many experiments with my teapots that they're always exposed to so many teas. I don't have a single teapot that's only exposed to one tea. So I don't have a consistently seasoned pot. I just like to test them out too much. But I do believe, from what I've noticed even from my friends' seasoned pots, the material matters a lot more from the very beginning until the end of the pot's life than the seasoning, I think. Wow. Okay, so this is lighter than I expected. This is really odd because I'm gonna say that this pot had a better performance than this pot here. Whereas, like, if God called me and said, make a decision that would save humankind as to which pot is gonna brew the better sencha, I'd be like, oh, it's this one, no problem. Like, humanity's fine, no problem. But this one's a little weaker. I think the aftertaste is a lot better, and the fragrance is a lot better from this pot here. The classic Tokoname, the one that you would think, just because it's so classic. This is like as classic as Tokoname gets. A red pot with a side handle. It's the most classic Japanese pot and the most representative of that particular region of Japan. So Tokoname is like one of the oldest pottery producing regions in Japan. And this is just iconic, made by a famous potter. I love the performance of this pot. But I guess it just goes to show that sometimes variables might, I don't know, just today it's not doing an amazing job like I usually think it would. The aftertaste is okay. I mean, it's great. The sweetness is great. But I'm almost grasping to find reasons why it's better than this. And that just means this one's brewing it better today. That's so odd. Why? Yeah, R.I.P. humankind. Tyler, do you keep the lid on after brewing? I used to, and then we did another set of experiments in November where you don't necessarily always have to keep the lid on after brewing. We did test it with a shopuware. We found that keeping the lid on between brews was better for the longevity, the depth, and the flavor, the technical, everything for that pu'er. Now, I haven't tested it with green tea, and green tea is the one that you want to kind of like, I would guess, the one that you don't want to steam too much inside. So what Tyler from Hakuna Matata is saying, you know, do you leave the lid on, which means you're trapping steam inside the pot if it's hot, but also allowing some of the aroma to escape the pot. And I used to be like no matter what, like, leave the lid off. No matter what, always leave the lid off after brewing. So in between every infusion I ever did in my life, I would remove the lid. It was almost a habit. Thank goodness I tested it, because the pu'er that I made with my habit of just removing in between infusions was just a lot weaker. So that's something we have to test eventually, is with green tea, is it also better to leave the lid on rather than off? And then someone pointed out I didn't test the in the middle option, which is leave the lid a little bit on with a little bit of a cover, and that's what I'm doing right now until I can test that. I'm just kind of like playing it safe. Yeah, wow. I can't believe that this pot, number one, is doing better than it usually does. That's insanity. I feel really guilty for talking all that smack about this pot all the friggin' time about how it doesn't do as well. What is going on there? That's insane. Now for you guys who just came in, we're testing... Ooh! I don't know. God, maybe humanity can be saved again. This got really bitter after resting. That's fascinating. Ooh, it got really bitter. I'm sorry, there's not like a clear result between these two. I know it's nice to have nice, clean, direct results, but there's just one where it's just not working out in both cases. You can see the color difference is still persisting, my friends. But the texture here is just more tangy and sharp. I pointed it out at the very first infusion. It was so good when it's hot because it took the edge off of that dryness, but now it's just that cat tongue thing going on. It's just... Yeah, I'm not happy with either of these steeps. Which is interesting. Ugh. 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 Why? Ugh. Gross. So, we just tested what happens to be my favorite pot for green tea and my least favorite pot for green tea, and neither of them did well today, so far. So let's see if any of the other ones will do a little bit better. I'm just preheating my... I'm just preheating my other pitchers. Yeah. Wow. That was interesting. Yeah. No-goes on both. I don't like this because even if it tasted really good when it was hot, it got so bitter, dry, astringent so quickly that if you just waited a little bit to steep it, it would have been bad. So, yes, I have to say, maybe it is true. I really don't like this pot for green tea. This one usually does amazing things with green tea. I think it's just an issue of like expectation, where usually this teapot makes like the angels sing and like unicorns pop out of a green tea, especially this one. But today it's just not going. It's just not showing up today. Maybe it's just a day off. You know, I don't know. Maybe I just poured it a different way. You know, I did interrupt the pour. Like, just so many variables in tea that the takeaway from these kinds of experiments is you don't do these experiments every day, but when you show up to someone's house and you're like, I brought my best water, I brought my best tea, I brought the teapot I know is good for this tea, and it still doesn't manifest the way you want it to be, sometimes it just happens. It's just, tea just has so many variables. But the more you can get to know and become comfortable with these variations, the more confident you will be when that happens. And you could just switch to your second best pot, which is hopefully is one of these guys, right? Yeah, hopefully. I'm gonna set these guys to the side for now. All right. All right. How are you guys doing? I'm a little bit, caught off guard. I like that when tea practice makes me feel like I don't know enough. Because the things I assumed about my pots are not really what I know about my pots. I guess, yeah. This wasn't as horrible as I thought it was. It was still horrible, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. And then this is, like, always amazing. It's been a long time since this pot's disappointed me. Like, even in our local tea club, our local, tea friends, we just know this pot brews amazing tea all the time. But sometimes it just doesn't. And that's okay. We all have off days. Even pots have off days. Another thing that could be different, that's causing this pot to react a little bit differently than I usually expect it to, is I changed my water formula. Ooh, more stuff! I changed the water that I used for my tea lately. I developed a new formulation for water. It's a little bit heavier than usual, and yeah, maybe that's what it is. This pot doesn't like the water that I use. Alright. So what did I say? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Yeah, I think that's how it is. So 3, 4, 5. Dope. Okay. Let's do the shebang. 2 minutes again with boiling water. No hiding here. And yes, I know people will say, it's because you use boiling water for the Sencha, that's why it doesn't dip. I know. I mean, I'm not gonna do it unless I'm aware of what it can do to my tea. So I'm making the decision to use hotter than usual water for these tests so I can bring out any issues. There's no hiding behind boiling water. And you only want to do this with your best green teas. I'm even pouring really harshly too, so I'm not giving these green teas any space at all to do their best. And the basic premise is that it's easy to brew tea of any kind at a low temperature when you baby it. But when you abuse the tea, that's when you can find the teas that are really good and the teaware matches that are really good, because there's no hiding behind lower temperature. Okay, last baby here. And then I'm counting how long it takes between each pot, just estimating that there's a certain amount of time between each pot that I need to pour. Alright. I made a mistake in my experimental design. What I should have done is left warmer water in these until I was ready to use them. Because now they're cooler than what these guys were from the first round. So keep that in mind, okay? A little bit less consistent. Your experiments don't have to be perfect, but just be aware of what is going on. Okay. Breathe. Eric, a good example of why one can taste a tea hot, warm, and cold. That's correct. Eric's point here is that at the very beginning, tea number 1 tasted just fine, and then after a while, it was horrible. I don't even want to taste it anymore. So at the very end, we will taste all of these cold, because the taste of a tea hot, warm, and cold will be completely different. And you can usually tell how good a tea is based on how well it does at every single temperature level. The best teas in the world, it doesn't matter what you do to them. They taste good, even if you've left them sitting out overnight on your counter. So we will taste all of these teas cold. Thanks for that, Eric. You've added a lot of more suffering to my live experience today, because I may or may not have decided to, or remembered to, drink them hot. warm and cold. But I will. This is a heavy pot. This is the heaviest one. Biggest one too. The workhorse Kyusu, the one I'm pouring out on right now. Seeing some differences in clarity. Okay, and with the Kyusu, you want to make sure that you kind of like steep out the last few drops. I'm not going to insist on pouring out every single last drop for this experiment because I need to get going, but on just your day-to-day use, make sure you pour out every single bit of tea from your Kyusu. Unless you don't want to. As long as you make an informed decision, no problem. But a common issue with people overbrewing green tea is leaving a couple drops at the very bottom of the Kyusu. Wow, it's dark. Color differences. Okay, let's take a look. Let's see. You need post-it notes to remember which pot is which number. Now I remember. 1, 2, actually no. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Maggie, nice to see you. I popped in a little bit late. Is the Sencha from anywhere in particular? This is from Tea and Whisk, the local tea shop that I host classes at. It's a Saimidori Sencha. I believe it's from Shizuoka, but don't quote me on that. I don't know the region. I just know it's a Saimidori, the cultivar. And Saimidori has like a very pleasant kind of like floral, almost like fruity, like very balanced. It's a milder Sencha, I would say. More friendly. More friendly. Oh, I forgot to show you the differences. Wow, look at the clarity. Okay, I'm gonna do something gross. It's just me anyway. Just so that you're not like, oh, Ree, you poured out some tea from that first one. That's why it looked so different. Look at the difference. Look at the difference. This is after I adjusted for the amount of tea in each pot. Okay? So do you see, like, it's not even just lighting. I can shift them around. See how clear number 3 is compared to number 4? Ooh, 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 ooh. Slippery. I don't know why I'm not using the handles. Wow. And then the color of number 5 is so much more yellow. Do you see that? It's so yellow. This one's like bright green. This one's yellow. What's going on? And then let's compare 4 and 5. The clarity is crazy. The clarity is crazy. I will say though that this one is probably the most green out of all of them. It's not a very nice looking green. It's all murky, but it's the greenest. Right? I mean, this one's pretty green too. This is crazy. What is going on there? Okay. All right. That's insane. They're just stupid. I hate tea so much. What is going on here? They're so different. Okay. Let's go actually taste them. My point about showing the color is that if the color is different, you betcha the taste is different too. I just can't show it with you. You just gotta trust me and whatever I'm saying when I taste these. So number 3 from a Korean Kyusu. This is not glazed on the inside. I usually use this for white tea. And the taste, it makes the tea a little bit more nutty and a little bit more grainy than it usually is. This tea is usually all fresh and floral and vibrant, but this is making it taste just a little bit more like a white tea, you know? Like it's got more of that nuttiness, more graininess. And I don't think it's because it's been seasoned for white tea, because I use so many different teas in this pot. I think what it is that white tea tastes good in that pot because what that pot is made of happens to make tea taste more in the levels that white tea kind of benefits from, you know? I think that is what's happening when we're trying to match our pots to our teas, is different materials will make different notes come out in the tea. And yeah, this pot, I like it for white tea because it does make that grainy thing come out. It's also very nice appearance, if that's something that matters to you in your tea practice. And I think if you're pouring for people for the first time, it is kind of nice to have like a brilliant liquor. It's very impressive to show that off, you know? I would say that's okay. It's not a bad match, but it's not the best match. And with so many friggin' pots, you might as well like find the really, really good match, you know? Alright, now pot number 4, the workhorse tokoname. And I say workhorse because it's not an expensive pot. It's, I think it's been painted on the surface. You can kind of tell how shiny it is. It's at least been like polished. It's not got like the classic like unglazed clay texture. You can kind of see by comparing the texture of this lid with the handmade tokoname. See how shiny this is? It's been polished to make it look more impressive. This one has probably got some polish to it too, but still unglazed. There's nothing painted on it. So I believe that there's something that was done to this particular pot to like make it shinier, and I think it is like a layer of paint. And that's okay. You see the inside is the actual clay, I believe. No, I don't know. Yeah, it's a little more rough, so that's interesting. If you touch your pots, you can tell if there is something applied to the surface. If the surface of the lid and the underside of the lid, which is the inside, the interior, has a different texture, and this is all glossy and smooth, this one's got a little bit more roughness. You see how matte it is compared to the outside? So, something that's going on right there. It's cheap, it's got a metal filter on the inside, and people will argue that the metal does change the flavor of the tea. I have never tested that side by side, but it probably does. So, I think it's just good for all teas though, because it's just, I don't want to fuss with it. How does it taste? It's very average. That's like as average as it gets. It doesn't do much. It doesn't say much. It's just a cup of tea. Wow. Alright. It's almost like if Lipton made a sencha, this would be it. That's so interesting. A tea that's so, you know, floral, and it's got some character to it. You know, it's not the most out of this world sencha, the sencha that I used, you know, but it is a nice sencha. It's got some freshness, florals, fruities, you know, it's sweet. It's a very sweet, very friendly sencha. And this pot just makes it average. It's good, but it's average. So, it just doesn't do any of the tea any favors. Yeah. And yeah, at least the color is intact though. Question from T Psyche. Maybe I missed it, but could you tell us where you got your pots? Yeah, sure, at the very end, once I finish this tasting here, so that I don't let this temperature drop too much, I can tell you exactly where I got all these pots, or if that vendor is not existing anymore, I can tell you where you might be able to find them. Alright. Last one. The most yellow out of all of the batches we've had so far. Look at how dull and yellow this is. It's so yellow. This is from the Banko pot. Now this is a completely different clay from the Tokoname clays. Banko tends to have like this kind of purple thing going on. This is also a mass-produced Banko clay pot. You know, so you could maybe guess that the clay quality isn't as perfect as the handmade ones, like the ones that are from a single maker and they make their own clay blends. You know, in general, they'll have tested their clay more. They'll be using higher levels, higher quality clay, but not always, because this guy is certainly handmade and from a very famous and wonderful potter. But it's horrible with Japanese green tea, so you just gotta test it out. Even a cheap pot can do better than an expensive pot, depending on what you match it with. And let's see how this goes. I'm sad. None of these were really, really amazing. Wow. So I was maybe hoping for like a turn in events, a change in events. This particular pot I really love for hojicha, like a lot. It's really, really good for hojicha. It makes amazing hojicha. Hojicha is that roasted Japanese tea. It is a green tea as well, but the roast makes it more caramelly, more smoky. It's a dark flavored tea. And it just, I use it for dark oolong as well. Anything that's roasty that I want to bring more sweetness out of and tone down the roast. With this green tea, it's just floundering. It just doesn't know what to do with it, almost. It's like, what the fuck do you want me to do with this? I don't, what is this? You know, like, is this hojicha? Like, it's just so good with hojicha that I just, yeah, it's just so... You can't expect the same teapot that's amazing with something to do amazing at something else. The best pots are amazing at what they do, and that's it. And that's okay. That's why we collect so many pots. This one here is just dry. It's a little sour, a little bitter, a little astringent. Yeah, just not my jam. And what the takeaway from this is, if you get a sencha, you know, from somewhere, and then you brew it in the wrong pot, you might blame the tea and not the pot. First of all, you need to match the right pot to the right tea. Second, just because the pot is not good with one tea doesn't mean it's not good with all teas. So it's just a matter of matching the correct tea to the correct pot. And if there's a pot that you have that you just can't seem to find the right match for, don't give up. Just test it to see if you can find a better match for it, even if it's not something that's what you'd expect. Because... like this guy, again, it's a Japanese pot, but it's amazing with wheat oolong, and I haven't found a single Japanese tea that tastes good in this Kyusu. So, yeah, let's line up all of these colors, because I want to show you the color differences of all the steeps that we did. And yes, Eric, I will taste these all cold. I hate you. A lot of these will taste awful. Okay. Yeah, they barely fit into the frame, but you can see them. Look at the color differences from all these pots. It's insane. Wow. Wow. It's so fun. Even if none of these were astronomically amazing, yeah, the pot that I did think would do best still did the best, just not amazing. And it's this pot here. So let's match them all up. Match them all up. Match them all up. Match them all up. Are they gonna fit? There's just so many of them. Oh god. This guy is over here for this one. So number one. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna say the only pot that did the tea any kind of justice. Okay, maybe this one did okay. These two did fine for the tea. This one made it taste less than it actually was. And then this one took away from it. And then this one was okay at first, but then it got so bitter. And that's why I usually avoid this pot. Yeah. We'll do one more tasting of these cold. And why we do that is because hot tea will tend to hide some issues with the tea sometimes. Like if a tea is going to be bitter, sometimes when it's really, really, really warm, you just freshly brewed it, you're not going to notice until later. So let's see. Really quick. Number one. Eric, why did you remind me to do this part? Okay, it's dry. It's nutty. It's dry. It's got a lot of aftertaste. The aftertaste is amazing. Really, really good aftertaste. But it's not worth the amount of bleh that's going on. Just not worth it. Okay? I need water. God. Okay, let me get some water. Yeah. It's just not working out here. Alright. I know some of you are brewing tea as well during this process. How did it go for you? Oh, sweet water. Oh, water's so amazing. Okay, second one. Wow, that's so different. This actually tastes okay. So this one became bitter over time. This one has a little bit of dryness to it, but it tastes just fine. So yeah, this is the winner. You can already tell, that's a shocking amount of sweetness and smoothness for a cold green tea. It's not bad. From the third one, we're trying one more time, the cold brew, or the cooled down tea from number 3. I could actually see this pot doing well with certain kinds of sencha that have a more grainy flavor to them. Does anyone remember any cultivars that taste more earthy and grainy from Japan? Those kinds of cultivars might taste okay with this pot because it tends to bring out more of that graininess, nuttiness. You know what I think would taste really good in this pot? I think is mugicha. Like barley tea would probably taste really good. So that's something I gotta test. As you test your pots, even if you hate what the result of your pot is, you can kind of start thinking, this sucked, but this is what it did to the tea. It might do good with this other tea that needs a different kind of help. Okay? So not bad. These actually turned out pretty okay. The texture is okay too. Makes it a little bit tart. I like these too. Yeah, good showing. Number 4, our workhorse tokoname. And then before I sign off, I'm probably going to talk about these pots, where you can get them, and then also the difference between these tokonames. Because we keep talking about tokoname, but what is it? What are the differences? It's so average. It's like you went to the grocery store and bought like Yamamoto Yama Sencha. You know, the most like basic, like it's in a green bag, it's kind of see-through, you're gonna like wrap it up with a, you know, you're gonna wrap it up in rubber band and forget it at the very back of your pantry for years because it's just so uninspiring. That pot turned this really friendly, fresh, flavorful tea into something super average. It's crazy. It doesn't taste bad. It's just so average. It's just so average. Why? It's just so average. It's so sad. It's flat, it's dull, there's no life. If this tea was in a shampoo commercial, they'd be like, you need to revitalize. It's just lifeless. So this pot took the life out of this tea, which is not what you want for green tea. Ugh, sad. And then the last one, the Banko Kyusu, which I usually use for hojicha. Another horrible one. How many horrible adjectives can you use to describe tea? It's sour, it's kind of dusty. Yeah, it's just not good. So my 2 winners are these 2. I'm surprised by how well this did, because I tend to not brew Japanese sencha in this pot. Now I know it's a contender for like Japanese sencha. If ever I want to mix it up a little bit, I can use this pot instead. You can think of your pots as Instagram filters or, you know, equalizers. You know, they change the tea in different ways, and you need to match them to the tea in order to produce a certain effect. You guys are more than just tea drinkers. You guys brew tea. You're almost designing the tea experience. So if you have a tea that you know is incredibly floral, incredibly fresh, you're trying to show someone for the first time how amazing a first flush sencha can be, you need to pick a pot that highlights the freshness, the floralness, the vibrancy of that pot, so of that tea. So I'd probably pick this one. But then if you're going for more like an earthy, kind of like rustic thing going on, I would pick this pot, and they're both valid. It just depends on how you're designing your tea experience here. And that's getting a little bit more advanced tea design, but that's what makes it fun. Like, you have options here. You're not a slave to what the tea wants to do. You can decide if you're aware of these variables. So yeah. Details about these pots, which I will post again later. This one is from Kanekawa Jin. He has some like, I think he mostly sells through vendors online. But this particular pot is a custom order that I did with him. He usually makes a lot bigger pots, so you'll see that his offerings are a lot larger. I was really lucky to be able to get a smaller version of his pots. And this is a reduction firing, which means that it started out this color here, but then it turned black because of the lack of oxygen during firing. These two are more classic tokonami pots. This one is a Shoji Umehara, extremely light, okay? And you can tell a little bit about the quality of the pot again by checking out how close the lid fits on the pot, but also if the surface of the pot is painted, you can tell by touching the lid and then touching the interior. If there's a difference between those two textures, something kind of went on that they did to improve the appearance of the pot. Practice will just tell you that these two pots look pretty similar on first glance because they're both red and they're both pretty and stuff. But wow, it's just something you have to practice. Eventually you'll be able to tell when something is tool made because it looks too perfect. Even if this one has nice ratios, there's still parts of it that you can tell are handmade, like the way that the spout joins the body of the pot here looks like it's been kind of like placed on by hand. Versus this one here is going to look really perfect. Okay? It looks almost like bolted on. And there's nothing wrong with using non-handmade pots. It's just good when you're buying tea pots to be able to determine what the level of quality is so that you're aware of what you're investing into, you know? Yeah. And then this one's Korean from Usihyung, wood-fired. And this one's just a standard everyday banko. Yeah. Which you can get, I think you can get these from Unomi, which is one of my favorite suppliers for Japanese teapots that are like workhorse pots. Yeah. That's it. That's it. Any questions? It's a lot of Kyusuing, a lot of ups and downs. Only 2 really, really good teas out of 5. But it just goes to show you really gotta test your stuff. Any questions for me? Any comments? Any tea stories? Let me know. I'm gonna go shut up my dog. It was really nice having fun tea practice with you today. I'm gonna do this again next Sunday. And maybe during the week. I don't know. I miss you guys. Tea practice is fun. Okay. Toodles. Have a good evening.